peace, even though Ukraine, at least for the time being, is dead set against doing so.
Thank you, Matthew. Again, please don't go anywhere, as I will be joining back with you very shortly. Former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and former President Bill Clinton are slated to testify this week in a House committee investigation into the activities of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Hillary Clinton will testify behind closed doors on Thursday, with Bill Clinton scheduled for Friday. The Clintons agreed to cooperate after lawmakers moved to hold them in contempt for refusing to testify earlier. Though there is no evidence linking the Clintons directly to Epstein's crimes, Bill Clinton's ties to Epstein have been documented. He has reportedly visited the White House multiple times in the 1990s and flew several times on Epstein's private jet after leaving once office. Newly released photos have also shown Clinton in social settings with Epstein and his associates, including images in a hot tub with a redacted woman and also in a pool with Ghislaine Maxwell. But the Clintons have maintained that they had no knowledge of Epstein's criminal activities. Meanwhile, Republican committee members, including Chairman James Comer, have promised to make this transcript of Clinton's depositions public. They've also stated that the committee will be looking into Epstein's connections to the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative. We are now being rejoined again by Matthew. Thank you for joining us back here. How might the unfolding Epstein files investigation and the Clintons' testimony shape broader public perceptions of political elites, especially considering the release of millions of documents and ongoing debate over transparency versus privacy in such a high-profile case?
Well, the Clintons are going to be testifying before Congress soon regarding the Epstein files and what they know about Jeffrey Epstein. They don't. I'm not sure what you mean about transparency, but I know that Bill Clinton was apparently a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein for many years, and there's many pictures of him cavorting, partying with Jeffrey Epstein. And that's not evidence necessarily that he did anything illegal, but Congress has a lot of questions that they want to ask him about his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, who's now a notorious sex trafficker. And there are many questions that people have about how politicians and celebrities and people, important people, cavorted with Jeffrey Epstein over the years. People want answers to these questions.
And given that these Epstein files have implicated a wide range of elite figures and prompted scrutiny of how the US Department of Justice has handled their release, what do you think the decision of Bill and Hillary Clinton to testify after resisting subpoenas and facing a potential contempt vote reveal about political accountability?
I think that the Clintons recognize that they have no choice, that if they don't testify, that they are going to be held in contempt of Congress, and they could be potentially go to jail. This is what happened to former Trump advisors Steve Bannon and current trade advisor Peter Navarro when they refused to testify in Congress. And I think the Clintons see that what happened to the Trump associates, and they realize that it could happen to them too, and so they're complying with congressional demands to say what they know about Jeffrey Epstein. So I think in that sense it is Bill and Hillary Clinton are political figures, and and there's accountability in terms of meaning that they are going to have to tell Congress what a congressional committee what they knew about Jeffrey Epstein. So that is a political accountability in a way. Whether it's going to lead to charges, it seems nobody has been charged so far or even arrested out of the Epstein files, except for the former Prince Andrew in England. This is political accountability of a sort.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Israel for a 2-day visit aimed at strengthening trade and defence ties between the two countries. Delivering a speech before the Knesset on Wednesday, the 25th of February, PM Modi spoke of the natural synergy between two countries, particularly in fields such as quantum technologies, semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Moreover, on the October 7th Hamas attack, PM Modi has condemned it as a barbaric terrorist attack, expressing deep sympathy for the lives lost. Modi has also reiterated India's firm support for Israel, while also voicing support for the Gaza Peace Initiative, stressing that it is important in sustaining the peace-building process in the region. Let's listen now into his statements.
For the last few years, India has been the fastest growing major economy in the world. Soon, we will be among the top 3 economies globally. At the same time, Israel is a powerhouse of innovation and technological leadership. This creates a natural foundation for our forward-looking partnership. Your pain, we share your grief. India stands with Israel firmly, with full conviction in this moment and beyond. I also carry with me the deepest condolences of the people of India for every life lost and for every family whose world was shattered in the barbaric terrorist attack by Hamas on October 7.
We are now being joined by Shruti Dasgupta, who's an international affairs analyst, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How does Modi's framing of a natural foundation for partnership, linking India's economic growth with Israel's innovation, shape expectations for future bilateral cooperation in defence, technology and trade?
Greetings to you and your viewers, Ellie. What I do know is that India has been was one of the very few first nations to recognize Israel. It is also one of the nations that recognizes two-state solution to the entire Gaza, Palestine and Israel question. So we do know how to balance out our diplomacy while recognizing a democracy like Israel. So we've made that very firm and sure, while we have condemned in the harshest of words what has happened on October 7th, and we have supported Israel through its endeavors in trying to get rid of Hamas as a terrorist organization. We have also opposed the annexation of the West Bank entire registration question that is right now concerning the rest of the world. So we do know how to balance out our friendships as well as our relations. Now moving on from what that particular statement really goes to. We are civilizational states, we are civilizational religious entities. We do happen to be Indians, as in the majority, that is the Hindus, as well as Jews, that is, and their majority, which is the majority of Israel, happen to have a target painted on our heads by the Islamist groups, the radicals and the fundamentalists, and we as a result share a bonding. These kind of violence, the kind of oppression that these two people face outside their own borders, pushes these two nations together. Now, beyond this, that is the personal connections that Jews and Hindus and Jews and Indians face. We understand each other's pain. We understand what happens to a nation that is consistently under threat, that is consistently attacked from inside out by Islamist groups. So we empathize with each other, and we are each other's support system. Over the past few years, Israel has invested in India's Make in India program by having Israel defense companies have their subsidiaries in India itself. Between 2020 and 2024, the defense cooperation between these two nations increased by 34%. So that shows that this is a multi-billion-dollar exercise that India is willing to participate in. We are no longer wanting to be just a consumer. India is a manufacturing production hub, and Israel understands and recognizes it. While Israel keeps its tech happy, as in they are they've got advanced technology, India brings in the muscle power, the manpower behind the mass production level. So we are looking for a defense cooperation from that. An FTA meeting is happening right now between the 23rd and 26th of February, where India and Israel, which we are working to iron out the details, where somewhere in 2025, end of 2025, there was an interim agreement framework that was set between these two nations. And now we are ironing out the finer details, that once that FTA is announced, we will realize that Israel is a partner nation for India. How? Not just in defense tech, we are also using irrigation technology, which Israel has, the desalination, the drip irrigation technology that Israel has developed to prosper in a dry land like the Middle East. India is using the very same to support its very large population. So the technology from Israel and Israel is not one of those partners that sells defense technology without actually giving access to technology. There are no locks, there are no keys, there are no special caveats to the use of the technology that Israel hands over to India. So by being co-producers, having trade in the go, by being an important part of India's IMEC plan, which counters China's BRI and Silk Route narrative, helps India and Israel grow together as co-producers, as nations that understand each other's political as well as cultural and religious identities, and as supporters throughout the world.
Thank you so much, Shruti, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. The death toll from heavy rains in Brazil's Minas Gerais state has risen to 46, with 21 people still missing. Flooding and landslides have displaced around 3,600 people in Juiz de Fora and Uba, two cities about 110 kilometres apart. Ricardo Dutra and a local resident mourned his 11-year-old son while his wife and daughter remain hospitalised. Authorities have sped up relief efforts, sending national defence professionals and health agents. Juiz de Fora's mayor urged residents in high-risk areas to seek shelter as the city remains in a state of calamity. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has responded to US President Donald Trump's claims regarding the killing of drug lord Nemesio Osagura, known as El Mencho. Speaking at her morning press conference, Sheinbaum has acknowledged that the United States did provide intelligence assistance, but Sheinbaum has stressed that it was the Mexico's National Defense Secretariat that carried out the entire operation that essentially led to the death of the new generation cartel leader on Sunday. President Trump, in his State of Union address on February the 24th, claimed credit for the takedown of the quote-unquote a sinful cartel kingpin, though he did not specify El Mencho by name. When asked about Trump's remarks, Sheinbaum called them potentially electoral rhetoric, but reiterated that Mexico's information was accurate. Let's now listen in to the Mexican president's statements.
Me llamó ¿qué día fue? Ayer, antier, ¿no? Una llamada de 8 minutos para preguntarme qué pasa en México, cómo están las cosas. ¿Están bien? Pues le platiqué cómo había sido el operativo, que habíamos tenido ayuda en inteligencia por parte del gobierno de los Estados Unidos, que iba muy bien la coordinación. Ya, bueno, pues muchas gracias, nos vemos, que estés bien. Y reunión.
A US Senate committee next week will consider for extending the planned life of the International Space Station by 2 years to give companies more time to develop a replacement for one of the few changes to NASA bill focused on rivaling China's growing footprint in space. The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation plans to take up legislation on March the 4th that would amend a NASA authorization bill that the ISS expansion and add a requirement that NASA build a base on its moon surface as part of its Artemis program. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump declares a golden age of America in his State of the Union address, defending his economic record amid sliding approval ratings. With Republicans fearing midterm losses, he credits himself with lowering inflation, cutting taxes and drug prices, and driving stock markets to record highs. Trump delivers his annual address amid falling poll numbers and a Supreme Court ruling that strikes down most of his signature tariffs. He largely sticks to the script but turns combative on immigration, trading shouted barbs with Democratic lawmakers. President Trump signals he may order military action against Iran, saying he will not allow what he calls the world's top sponsor of terrorism to obtain a nuclear weapon. Despite building up US forces in the Middle East, he offers limited detail on why such a strike would be necessary. Ukrainian negotiators meet US officials to discuss post-war reconstruction, including a proposed prosperity package, President Volodymyr Zelensky says. Talks will also prepare for a possible trilateral meeting with Russia, which Kyiv hopes to hold in early March. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Israel for a 2-day visit aimed at deepening strategic ties as US-Iran tensions raise fears of regional conflict. Modi, who made a historic visit in 2017, seeks to build on growing defense and diplomatic cooperation with Prime Minister Netanyahu. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz begins his official visit to China, pushing to reset trade and address strains on Germany's manufacturing sector. Meeting Premier Li Qiang in Beijing, both sides back free trade amid US tariff disruptions and sign agreements on climate and food security. The United Nations Security Council expresses deep concern over escalating violence in Sudan and calls for an immediate end to the fighting. The Council condemns drone attacks on civilians and aid workers, including multiple strikes affecting World Food Programme operations. Japan says it will deploy surface-to-air missiles to its western island of Yohaguni by March 2031, signalling a stronger defence posture near Taiwan. The island lies just 110 kilometres from Taiwan amid rising tensions with China. Those are the headlines, but we start this hour with developments coming out of Europe's defining conflict, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed that Ukraine and the United States will hold bilateral talks in Geneva on February the 26th. These will be led by Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov and US negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. The discussions will focus on a prosperity package, with both sides looking to finalise details. Following this, preparations will begin for a trilateral meeting involving Ukraine, the US and Russia, expected in early March. Zelensky also mentioned that a prisoner exchange will be discussed, along with progress on humanitarian issues. Despite tensions in political negotiations, the military track has made significant progress, with ceasefire terms nearing completion. Joining us now is retired Major General A.K. Sawatch, a geostrategic expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on the programme. It's great to have you on. First of all, bilateral talks between the United States and Ukraine. We've seen them before throughout Donald Trump's second term. However, this security guarantees document, what the United States and Ukraine are calling a prosperity package, what are the options of what it might hold here? Obviously, Article 5 of NATO has been ruled out along with the organisation's membership. But what will Ukraine be hoping for in that document?
No doubt, Thomas. What's happening is that Ukraine cannot join NATO. That's a red line of Russia. So therefore, Ukraine has to find some sort of a security measure, and that's why they are say a security guarantee akin to Article 5 of NATO must be given. And I think that's where process is going on. The US, whereas Europe and NATO will also get involved and give the security guarantee. Now, what is happening is presently with the meeting which should take place tomorrow, basically in Geneva, that is between the US official as well as the Defense Minister of Ukraine and his team. The US official Steve Witkoff and also Jared Kushner, who is the son-in-law of Donald Trump. Now, what they are likely to discuss is the prosperity package. That is the reconstruction activity. How will it shape? What are the contours of this, especially after the ceasefire comes? Because 70% of the infrastructure of Ukraine has completely been destroyed by the Russian attack, and therefore it needs that the prosperity package should be good enough to take care of the complete reconstruction. Now, as far as Ukraine is thinking that possibly they will able to sort of get about $800 billion of public and private funds in next 10 years. That's what they are thinking they will able to attract. And as per the World Bank, it requires about $588 billion for this reconstruction. All said and done, it's not an easy task. There are two issues which are involved. One is there has to be first ceasefire. Now, that's what it is saying, that possibly both the sides are now proceeding towards the ceasefire. There are certain gray area. There are matter of dispute between Russia and Ukraine. Russia's red lines are that they want complete Donbas area, that Donetsk and Luhansk, even the one which they have not still under control, and they want to negotiate on Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, whereas they possibly may able to compromise in Kherson. And at the same time, they want that Ukraine should not join NATO. Whereas the Ukraine saying that if they don't join NATO, they must get a safety guarantee akin to Article 5. And the the main important thing where the sticking point is that Ukraine is not ready to give land which is not taken by Russia so far in Donetsk and Luhansk. Now that is the sticking point. Possibly some sort of compromise will be reached. It looks to me like this because the way things are happening, possibly there can be ceasefire. Now this bilateral talk will take place now, and thereafter trilateral talk place in month of March, where Russia will also come in, and some sort of ceasefire guidelines may be finalized. So overall, it looks like that things are moving in the right direction. First the ceasefire, then the reconstruction activity done by the prosperity package.
Okay, and also, of course, the major sticking point going into those possible trilateral talks that will be coming early March is territory. Now, there is no point in even discussing this so-called prosperity package until territory is agreed upon. Do you think that both Russia and the United States are putting enough pressure on Ukraine to give up territory? Do you think that's going to happen, especially, of course, with Europe in Ukraine's corner when it comes to this, even given that it doesn't have a seat at a table in these talks coming up?
The point is, Thomas, you have to be realistic. Ukraine must understand that it can't regain what it has lost. It will keep on losing much more than what it has lost so far. Because as the war is progressing, it is advantage to Russia. And Russia is progressing toward the western side, that is eastern Ukraine. It is already taken almost 85% of Donetsk and Luhansk area. And in case if Ukraine does not agree to the terms and conditions of giving complete Donbas, then the war will not stop. And if the war does not stop, you will find that Ukraine will be further losing the area. And therefore, it is in the interest of peace and prosperity of the whole region that war must stop. And to war to stop, I suppose Ukraine has to agree to give some land to Russia. I think the US also want that, Russia also want. Of course, the Europe is not agreeing, NATO country, but they will agree, because otherwise the peace is not going to prevail. Then very rightly you said, where is the question of prosperity and reconstruction is starting until the ceasefire does not take place? I fully agree with it, but to me it looks like that it will be give and take. It has to be that. You remember, Crimea was taken in 2014 by Russia. Nothing happened that time. Who said what? Nothing. So therefore, Ukraine must understand what is the ground reality. The ground reality is that Russia is advancing every day, and there is a more damage which is taking place in Ukraine side. Their infrastructure almost 70% is already gone. The energy sector is totally non-functional. People are suffering in Ukraine. There is no electricity as well as the gas. So in case if they think that peace must prevail, this has to be a compromise. It's supposed to be give and take from the both sides, Thomas.
If Ukraine does indeed agree to concede territory, what does that mean for the future of international law, the violation of sovereignty? What if Putin does indeed decide to fulfill his previous war aims and take the entirety of it later on? These security guarantees, of course, so important to Ukraine for that reason. What are your thoughts on the concerns there? Surely Zelensky can't just give away territory, given that he was in fact invaded back in 2022. Doesn't that set a precedent?
I know, I agree with you, Thomas. You are hitting the nail on the head. The problem of Zelensky that he does not have power to concede to the territory which is already in the Ukraine hand. That point is valid. But the area which has been taken by Russia so far in Donbas area, Donetsk, Luhansk, and the one which is still with the Ukraine, some 15%, it is a Russian-speaking area. Traditionally, it has been always with Russia. Even when the Soviet Union want to gather, and there was some sort of insurgency going on before Russia attacked on Ukraine on 24th February 2022. So to me, it looks like that. Until unless you do not concede something, it has to be give and take. And as we are saying that in case if Ukraine gives this area, tomorrow Russia will try to take more and may attack on Europe. I think it's a more far-fetched because after all, Ukraine will get security guarantee. And in case if it get a security guarantee and if Russia attack again, then I'm sure the security guarantee will take care of it. And it will be akin to Article 5 of NATO. So I suppose if we want a peace, there has to be some negotiation, it has to be give and take, and both sides have to concede to each other requirement so that peace prevails, otherwise the war will continue.
Major General Sawatch, do stay with us as we turn over to a related development coming out of Ukraine. The ambassador, Valery Zalekuzny, has said that the first Ukrainian drone production plant has started its operations in Britain. Zalekuzny has added that Ukraine is fighting a war amid constant missile strikes, infrastructure destruction, and threats to production facilities, and therefore the launch of production in the UK has a deep strategic logic. He also said that this is not a shift of the centre of gravity away from Ukraine, and it's an expansion of our joint capabilities and the creation of a second line of defence that guarantees continuity of production. Now we turn from war in Europe to war in Southeast Asia, where a Myanmar military airstrike on February the 24th killed at least 17 people in the western state of Rakhine, a region in Myanmar plagued by conflict since the 2021 military coup. The strike targeted the village market in Yo Ngu Phnom Gyun township, killing civilians, including children. The Arakan army, which controls much of the Rakhine, condemned the attack and reported that 15 more people were injured. The military's actions have intensified since the junta's power grab, with Rakhine suffering regular airstrikes, a blockade and rising malnutrition due to reduced international aid. Local witnesses described the aftermath of the attack as catastrophic, with destroyed buildings and widespread panic. Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. We were just discussing the general election of Myanmar just a few weeks ago. It was hoping to bring political legitimacy to the country, but of course we forget a civil war rages on there. What are your thoughts on the latest wave of attacks and the broader scale of how intense that civil war is right now?
This election is legitimized government, and legitimized government means that they can vote rebellion as a meaningless rebellion or something like that view from the Myanmar government. But a view from the other country, that election was not legitimized election because people vote for the army. It's just a support of the army. And so such kind of the vote is not election in the in other country. So that's why the military junta tried to increase the military operation against the Democrat side, but at the same time, it is not the legitimized military action against the civilian in Myanmar. And in case of the Myanmar's airstrike, indeed, this is a very big problem. The Myanmar's airstrike is destroying many civil purpose facilities in the area the army cannot occupy. So that's why this is violence against unarmed innocent civilians. And so that's why the many countries in the world do not want to support Myanmar's government airstrike. But in this case, Russia and China is providing weapons, and Myanmar can do that. So this airstrike operation itself is one of the representative of the Myanmar's military junta's side, which is they are authoritarian, not respect democracy. So even if they conducted the so-called election, which only Myanmar's military junta support vote, it is clear that what Myanmar's military junta did is quite authoritarian style.
Yes, and the nature of the way in which the military junta is using its air power. What can you tell us about the sheer brutality that is being used by General Min Aung Hlaing's military forces?
In this case, their target is important. Target is hospitals, schools. These are the infrastructure of their living. Because if they attack these facilities, people cannot maintain their lifestyle. That's why these people try to escape the area, and the military junta push them outside of the area, and they can occupy it. That's why the target is this infrastructure. But such kind of the attack itself is clearly indicate that their military operation is fight against civilian. So that's why if the military junta say all of the target is military purpose target, but that's not true. The civil purpose target is the target of them. So that's why such kind of military operations, they should not do that. And the international community can understand the current military junta is bad government.
Dr. Satoru Nagao, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Do stay with us as we turn over to our next story. Chinese President Xi Jinping has told German Chancellor Friedrich Merz that their countries should strengthen strategic communication and mutual trust as the world becomes more turbulent and complex. Xi said he attached great importance to the two countries' relations. Merz, on his first visit to China, becomes the latest European leader seeking to reset ties with Beijing after Britain's Starmer and Canada's Carney earlier this year. Engagement between Europe's largest economy and China could set the stage for EU-China relations. Let's take a listen in to what Xi has said.
10年前呢，我曾经在一些场合呢提出了一个论断，就是世界正在经历100年未有大变局。近期呢，你也表示，我们正在经历划时代的转折。世界越是变乱交织呢，中德两国要加强战略沟通，增进战略互信。
Dr. Nagao joins us once again to discuss this. Dr. Nagao, of course, we've seen some sort of tensions between Germany and China. Johann Wadepool, for example, the foreign minister, postponed his visit earlier this year, citing national security concerns, among others. However, Chancellor Friedrich Merz follows a flurry of Western leaders that have all went to Beijing earlier in the past few months. What can you hope from this visit, and what does this new Western warmth to Beijing signify?
View from China and view from Germany, there is a gap. View from China, authoritarian regime is a good regime and the democracy is not good. So in case of the democracy, look at the United States, that they said, President Trump imposed a tariff to many countries. After that, the court in the United States said this is illegal and the tariff is currently is uncertain. This is a democracy, and democracy needs election to choose the government, but every some years they need to change the government. That is also uncertainty, China said. So that's why the China want to say that China is trustworthy because long term the same government continue. So when the United States show they are the democracy and which is a little bit unstable because of the people's choices change always. But so view from China, this is a chance to expand influence. But view from Germany, this democratic instability is a good thing. Because the people's opinion is reflected, that's why democracy is uncertain. And this uncertain means that opinion is reflected. So that's why this is the opinion of the people. And if Germany choose a side between the US or China, it is clear that Germany choose the United States as a ally. So that's why when Germany face some problem with the United States, because they want to cooperate with the United States as a tactics, as a pressure to the United States, Germany want to cooperate with China and ask the United States, is it okay for you? That is a message. But
yes.
Indeed, the real opinion of the Germany is very clear. Germany is the US side, not the China side. So that's why even if the China try to exploit the situation to expand influence to the Germany, indeed Germany will not reply, could happen.
Yes, Dr. Saturno Nagao, thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue to cover that visit as MERS continues his 2-day visit to China over the next 48 hours. But now we move finally to Europe, where France has appointed Christophe Leriboul as the new head of the Louvre following a series of challenges, including a major jewelry heist and staff strikes. Leriboul is a renowned 18th century art historian who previously led the Palace of Versailles and other prestigious museums like Musée d'Orsay and Orangerie. According to reports, his task will be to modernize and secure the Louvre after the October heist, which exposed serious security flaws, and to address ongoing strikes, leaks and fraud investigations. A government report last year urged the museum to prioritize security and infrastructure improvements over acquisitions. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so I think it hasn't really changed our understanding the quantum world work.
Our job with the James Webb Space Telescope was to look as far back in time as we could to see the universe as it was young.
Changing the basic attitude about what education is for and what it needs to be.
Biology, medical studies, they make great progress.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reforms, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and
Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Iran and the US hold the latest round of talks in Geneva today aimed at resolving their long-standing nuclear dispute and averting new US strikes on Iran following a large-scale military build-up. The two countries renewed negotiations this month, hoping to tackle a decades-long standoff over Tehran's nuclear program. Cuban forces killed 4 people and wounded 6 others aboard a Florida-registered speedboat that entered Cuban waters on Wednesday and opened fire on a Cuban patrol, the Cuban government said at a time of heightened tensions with the United States. The United States has eased an oil embargo on Cuba, but Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the communist-run island must change dramatically, saying it only had itself to blame for an economic crisis. Former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is set to testify behind closed doors before a congressional committee investigating the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Former President Bill Clinton is scheduled to answer questions the following day. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he and the US President Donald Trump agreed that the next session of trilateral talks in March on a war settlement should lead to a meeting of the country's leaders. Jimmy Lai, the jailed pro-democracy tycoon, won an appeal overturning his 2022 fraud conviction. The Court of Appeal quashed the conviction, but Lai remains in jail. The death toll from the heavy rains in Brazil's southern eastern state of Minas Gerais has risen to 46. Flooding and landslides displaced around 3,600 people in the cities of Juiz de Fora and Uba, while 21 people remain missing. The US is blocking the Venezuelan government from paying for Nicolas Maduro's legal representation in the drug trafficking case he faces in New York. Maduro and his wife both pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking charges. And for your top stories this hour, Larry Summers, former president of Harvard University, will resign from teaching at the end of this academic year in a decision that is reportedly linked to the review of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. This follows the release of emails by the US House Oversight Committee, which raised question about Summers' relationship with the late financier. The emails reveal a friendship between Summers and Epstein that lasted until 2019 and raises questions about Harvard's ties to Epstein, who donated over $9 million to the university. Meanwhile, a senior Democrat in Congress has accused the Justice Department of withholding FBI interviews with a woman who accused US President Donald Trump of sexual abuse as a minor. Moreover, Representative Robert Garcia has alleged that the DOJ suppressed over 50 pages of material related to the woman's claims, which had been part of the latest release of the Epstein documents. Garcia further claimed that the DOJ's actions heightened concerns of a possible White House cover-up, especially after the department released only the first of 4 interviews with the woman. We are now being joined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar, who is a journalist and is joining us from South Korea. Thank you for joining us here today on NewsX World. In what ways might Summers' resignation and similar resignations in academia and other sectors reshape conversations about accountability for powerful individuals with past connections to criminals?
Although against Summers there were no criminal charges, but his action shows that he has taken the accountability into his decision, and he doesn't want to sound like a non-responsible person who has no good hope for the future-oriented, healthy elite circles. And that is why, in order to protect the image of the institutions and in order to protect the institution from the controversies, he has taken this step.
And how do these developments intersect with ongoing congressional scrutiny of Epstein's networks, including hearings involving other political figures, and what implications does that have for public trust in political and academic institutions?
Yeah. Actually, it has raised eyebrows in many elite circles and the academic circles, and not just Harvard University, but there were other universities in the world as well who had been facing this. And because of that, in post-Epstein file era, it is presumed by the analysts that many universities would be very strategic in saving the image of their universities and the academia. And that is why this sort of action is very critical and very important. And its substantial effects are likely in coming days.
And we've just heard that the Democrats are saying that there are still documents released that have Donald Trump included that were missing from this latest drop of Epstein files. What are the legal and ethical implications if it's true that the US Department of Justice has withheld or excluded FBI interview records, including more than 50 pages from the publicly released Epstein files that relate to allegations against President Donald Trump?
See, that would have a kind of legal battle, and many experts and even legal experts are looking into it. They are analyzing right now. So we have to wait some more days in order to conclude anything on this. But of course, there are views that it should not be used either in support or against Trump, and that is where this justice system in the United States comes into. And both the sides, pro-Trump and anti-Trump, those both forces are trying it not to be politically polarized. And that is the situation right now.
And how does this dispute over missing or withheld documents affect public confidence in federal transparency laws, like the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and the broader credibility of the Justice Department?
See, it raises concerns in terms of public trust, because when you have these missing cases, then it affects the trust of public in the system, and especially in a trust-based system of United States. It is really alarming, because it has been an example of democracy. It has been an example of information sharing, the ecosystem of system that they used to have. So no, it raises comprehensive concerns, and that is why the public trust needs to be upheld. And I'm sure that the civil societies are looking very closely to all these developments.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay, but please don't go too far, as we will be joining back with you very shortly. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has stated that the Pyongyang is willing to get along with the United States, but only if Washington officially recognizes North Korea's nuclear status. Speaking after the country concluded its 9th Party Congress, Kim emphasized that if the US respects North Korea's current nuclear status and ends its hostile policies, there is no reason for tensions to persist. This statement, broadcast by state media KCNA, came as North Korea held a military parade to commemorate the Congress. Kim also reaffirmed that North Korea has irreversibly established itself as a nuclear power. The conclusion of the 9th Congress, marked by Kim's remarks, represents a pivotal moment in North Korea's political and military development. These developments come amid growing global concerns over North Korea's nuclear ambitions and its ongoing defiance of international sanctions. Regardless, North Korea remains firm in its stance, signalling that its nuclear capabilities are non-negotiable. Meanwhile, international discussions continue, but tensions between North Korea and the West show no signs of easing. We are now being rejoined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar. Thank you for rejoining us back here on NewsX World. How might this conditional opening towards the US affect Washington's policy options, especially balancing pressures to denuclearize the Korean peninsula with the possibility of reducing tensions through engagement?
See, the North Korean perspective is very clear to understand. They do not want to talk anything about denuclearization in present times. In the past also they didn't want, and in future also they don't want. So they are very strategic in their message, and the message also shows the interest of the North Korean regime in engaging with the US. And in April, when Trump is going to be in China, North Korea would like to be in focus. You know, last year during the APEC summit, Trump showed some interest, but after that, because these North Koreans did not, I mean, Kim Jong-un did not show interest in any possible Trump-Kim summit. So after that, all these discussions went into limbo. But in the recent days, if you see the growing ties and the consolidation of Russia and North Korean regime, then picture becomes very clear that they are trying to engage more and more countries into it, and they want to kind of engage US by through some kind of negotiation tactics, by keeping this denuclearization agenda into like kind of downplaying thing, I mean, off the table. And this kind of statements are in alignment of this objective.
And how should neighbouring powers such as China, Japan and Russia interpret Kim Jong-un's calls for recognition and its current display of military might at the party Congress parade? And what roles might they play in shaping or responding to these shifts?
See, this show of strength has not been new. It has been in the practice since many years. We should say many decades, like 5-6 decades. They had been doing this. It is nothing new. But if you see the perspective of other neighboring countries, as you mentioned, Russia. For Russia, it is a very positive approach, because for Russia, it is good to see North Korea flexing their muscles because they are in alignment. They are under agreement also. They have defense agreement. They are doing the things in cooperation, especially when it comes to security and defense. They had been fighting the war together. So for Russia, it is very much a positive approach, and they would always be seeing in future also to flex the muscle even together with North Korea. And from Chinese perspective, for them, it is a kind of a neutral approach. They would not be commenting on this, and rather than that, they would be just observing it, because China doesn't want to get into any confrontation when it comes to security dynamics, and they want to have North Korea on their side, if not actively, at least passively. And it is not new that they fought the war together in Korea in 1953. So they have those all legacies. So China and Russia, they are not going to see this kind of muscle flexing in any negative form. But yes, for South Korea, it's a concern. And Japan also, it's a concern. And US, ROK, and Japan trilateral alliance is observing all these things. And definitely, it is not going to affect with that intensity. And this messaging also shows that tone. I mean, they want to engage with the Trump. They want proper attention when Trump will be in China.
And beyond the domestic political controversy, what message does this episode send internationally about how the US handles transparency given the backdrop of the recent North Korea and interactions beyond all the political controversy, including possible high-level talks in the region, what benchmarks should international observers look for to gauge whether North Korea's rhetorical opening towards the US translates into concrete diplomatic progress? What message are they looking for here?
See, on the diplomatic front, there had been some demands from the North side for talks, and that was not to talk on denuclearization and exemption of these sanctions. These two issues were also always on the table. But from the US and ROK side, they had been always telling North Korea to denuclearize themselves, at least if not complete, at least step by step. That has been the approach of the US ROK alliance towards North Korea. And then based on that, sanctions could be not lifted, but sanctions also could be a step by step lifted. But that kind of gesture was not shown from the North. They had been very aggressive, and they had been even criticizing openly the US ROK exercises, and even those military exercises had been always creating tensions between the two sides. But if you see the messaging now, the messaging looks softer and it looks little engaging. But as an expert, we should not trust North Korea, because it is always based on the optics, and it is always based on some hidden agenda that they try to, that they leverage always. So that is why from US and ROK side, there needs to be a very close analysis and observation. And based on that only, I'm sure that Trump's advisors would be deciding anything, whether to have a Trump-Kim summit or whether to see North Korea as any sort of matter in this visit. So they will be also analyzing it very in a very calibrated manner. So a calibrated approach is needed right now.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay Kumar, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. The International Monetary Fund has urged the United States to collaborate with its trading partners to ease trade restrictions. In its latest report, the IMF emphasised the need for mutual efforts to reduce tariffs and other trade barriers, believing that such actions could support global economic recovery. The IMF highlighted the importance of reducing trade tensions, which have been worsened by rising protectionism and ongoing economic challenges in many countries. This call comes amid concerns over the impact of trade curbs on global supply chains and international debt. While the US has maintained strict trade policies in recent years, the IMF believes a cooperative approach with its partners could benefit all sides, fostering a more stable and productive global market. Nonetheless, the IMF remains hopeful that easing trade restrictions could help stabilise the global economy. We are now being joined by Sharad Kohli, who's a senior economist joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How might the US administration balance domestic political pressures, such as calls from the IMF and with their advice to ease trade barriers in coordination with partners?
Greetings, Ali, to you and NewsX World viewers. I think it's quite ironical, this kind of statement coming from IMF. We should not forget that IMF, as far as components are concerned, as to who dominates IMF, more than 17% of IMF is still controlled by the United States of America. So it is the biggest partner as far as IMF is concerned, or shall I say it's the biggest dominating partner. And then comes Japan, which is about 6.5%. China is about 6.4%. Germany is about 5.6%. UK and France are 4.2% each. So obviously the statements are coming out of China and Germany and UK to a certain extent. So that is the sanctity of the statement, because when US is the principal dominating partner, I really don't think President Trump is going to heed to that advice. He has not heeded to this advice as far as the local people of US is concerned. He has not listened to the advice of many, advisors within his own country, some of the Republicans in his own country. So I have my doubts if this kind of statement from IMF is going to have any impact on the US. Ellie, I'm sorry, this is just not going to work. It's too mild a statement for somebody like President Trump, who's quite adamant, and he's been threatening tariffs even after the Supreme Court order, which nullified the tariffs levied as reciprocal from 2nd of April. He's completely disregarded that. He's threatened in a State of Union address, which came in, day before night of the US. He said, I'm going to levy more tariffs. I know which countries are playing games and so on. So his threats keep coming. So IMF's simple statement that, this looks like a very, very docile kind of statement that, okay, see that there are no tariffs, the supply chains don't get impacted. I really, really don't think, Ellie, this is going to have any impact on the US, particularly when 17.4% of IMF as the largest partner is US itself.
And what role should coordinated international action play in addressing unfair trade practices and industrial policy distortions, and what challenges might arise in reaching consensus among major economies?
Well, as far as the US is concerned, Ellie, I really don't think the US is at this point of time believing in multilateralism, not even bilateralism for that matter, because all the trade deals done ever since 2nd of April 2024, they stand nullified because of the Supreme Court order. This has frustrated and irritated President Trump, and this is definitely not very good as far as political standing is concerned. His approval rating has fallen down, and as far as the other countries are concerned, there is utter confusion because he's used Section 122 of the US Trade Act 1974 to levy 15% tariff, and which ultimately turned out to be 10% when the notification came last night. So I think there is utter confusion, because what the nations at this point of time are not able to decipher is whether the deals hold good because they stand nullified legally, or whether the Section 122 tariff holds good. So I think because they have been levied from immediate effect and he's threatened with more tariffs, I don't think President Trump is going to settle for anything less than what he had agreed with various countries. So at this point of time, Ellie, there is utter confusion around the world. I think the days to come will clarify when President Trump settles down on his frustration because of the US Supreme Court order as to how he takes the order. At this point of time, he's calling the judges by all sorts of adjectives, which sounds quite unparliamentary to me, because they are part of the judiciary and they should be respected. But nevertheless, that's how President Trump gives the statements. So for now, I think there is confusion. Only in the next few weeks, things will be clear. But for sure, inflation is going to shoot up in America because tariffs are not going to go anywhere. And the US GDP numbers, Ellie, have come to be very pathetic. Just 1.4% growth in the October-December quarter of 2025, the last recorded GDP, which is down from 4.4% in the preceding quarter. So I think the US economy is already reeling under pressures of tariffs and inflation and other problems. So at this point of time, $39 trillion of debt, 130% debt to GDP ratio of US. So I think the economy is not in a very good shape, although in the State of Union address in the Congress the other day, he said economy is doing very well. We are doing better than any other times. Our inflation is low. Our stock markets are booming, and so on and so forth. But I suppose that's a political statement because you've got midterm elections coming in the U.S. in November 2026. So obviously, his statements have to be sounding or smelling of politics to be politically correct when he's speaking something. But the realities on the ground is that there are no jobs in the U.S. at this point of time. In comparison with the people who are looking for jobs, no new investments are coming on its own. Obviously, forced investments are coming, which are being done in the garb of deals. So all in all, I think at this point of time, the world supply chains, the world, or shall I say multilateral trade at this point of time is in a bit of a disarray as far as the US is concerned, Ellie.
Thank you, Sharad Kohli, for speaking with us today on NewsX World. Thank you. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet said that Phnom Penh wants de-escalation and peaceful resolution to its border conflict with Thailand after Bangkok this week accused its neighbour of violating a December truce. Manet has added that Cambodia is not escalating as it wants de-escalation and wants peaceful coexistence. Let's listen to what Hun Manet had to say.
We're not escalating, we want de-escalation, we want peaceful coexistence, we want relationship to be restored. Cambodia and Thailand, we have 75 years of relationship last year, we just celebrated. And for Cambodia, we just want to have the relationship to go in a mutual, a peace with respect, and mutual respects, and understanding for each other. Border peace, we believe it is an addition to the existing multilateral organization that could help to promote peace and stability around the world. With many wars broke out everywhere, I think the more the better, with the same goal of organizations.
Paramount has sweetened its offer to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery, proposing $31 per share in a hostile bid. This move challenges Warner's deal with Netflix, where Netflix would acquire Warner's movies and TV business, including hits like Game of Thrones and The Sopranos. In a statement, Warner Brothers Discovery acknowledged that Paramount's offer could lead to a company's superior proposal, suggesting a possible change in direction. The Netflix deal has faced scrutiny from lawmakers, and President Trump has criticized Warner board member Susan Rice. Paramount's bid would also include $7 billion termination fee if Warner cancels its Netflix deal. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so I think it hasn't really changed our understanding the quantum world work.
The job with the James Webb Space Telescope was to look as far back in time as we could to see the universe as it was young.
Changing the basic attitude about what education is for and what it needs to be.
Biology, medical studies, they make great progress.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says he sees a favourable outlook ahead of a third round of talks with the United States. He says the negotiations held under the guidance of the Supreme Leader could help end the long-standing standoff with Washington. President Trump declares a golden age of America in his State of the Union address, defending his economic record amid sliding approval ratings. With Republicans fearing midterm losses, he credits himself with lowering inflation, cutting taxes and drug prices, and driving stock markets to record highs. Paris Saint-Germain named defender Achraf Hakimi in their squad for the Champions League tie against Monaco despite his impending rape trial. French prosecutors confirm the 27-year-old Morocco international will stand trial while he denies any wrongdoing. Syria confirms a mass escape from Al-Hol camp after Kurdish forces withdrew, allowing relatives of suspected Islamic State jihadists to flee. Officials say the camp was left in disorder, leading to collective escapes from a facility long seen as a security flashpoint. Ukrainian negotiators meet US officials to discuss post-war reconstruction, including a proposed prosperity package, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said. Talks will also prepare for possible trilateral meetings with Russia, which Kyiv hopes to hold in early March. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Israel for a two-day visit aimed at deepening strategic ties as US-Iran tensions raise fears of regional conflict. Modi, who made a historic first visit in 2017, seeks to build on growing defense and diplomatic cooperation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A military airstrike in Myanmar's Rakhine state kills 17 people, including women and children, and injures 14 others. The attack comes weeks after a military-backed election was dismissed by international observers as a sham amid ongoing civil war. Chancellor Friedrich Merz begins his first official visit to China, pushing to reset trade ties and address strains on Germany's manufacturing sector. Premier Li Qiang in Beijing. Both sides back free trade amid US tariff disruptions and sign agreements on climate and food security. We start this hour with some breaking news coming out of China, and Beijing and Berlin have issued a joint statement emphasizing that the importance of open dialogue, fair competition and mutual market access. Both countries highlighted their commitment to continued communication on key global issues, particularly regarding the ongoing Ukraine conflict. The two sides expressed support for efforts to achieve a ceasefire and lasting peace in alignment with the principles of the UN Charter. Furthermore, China and Germany reaffirmed their willingness to engage in discussions on climate change and green transition, underscoring their shared responsibility in addressing global challenges. Both nations also agreed to address concerns through frank and open dialogue, signalling a continued cooperative approach in various sectors. We'll bring you more on that visit as news comes in to us. But now over to some breaking news coming out of Africa, and according to reports, the Democratic Republic of Congo forces have launched attacks on multiple fronts against the M23 rebel group. Earlier yesterday, a fragile ceasefire in eastern Congo appeared to falter further as the rebel alliance known as AFC M23 accused government forces of launching a series of drone and artillery strikes on densely populated towns, deepening fears that a regional truce brokered less than 2 weeks ago is collapsing. We'll bring you all the developments coming out of DRC and that ongoing conflict as soon as we get them. But now over to West Asia and some more breaking news coming out of the Middle East. And a senior official from Hezbollah has indicated that while the organization supports Iran politically, it would not automatically join a conflict with the United States in the event of what Washington calls limited military strikes against Iranian targets. Hezbollah's leadership said the group is not neutral and has close ties with Tehran, but stopped short of promising direct military engagement. Instead, it emphasized that it will assess the situation before deciding any course of action. We'll bring you all the updates coming out of Lebanon and that broader situation. We stay in West Asia to start this hour. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, along with his team, departed Tehran for Geneva ahead of a third round of talks with the United States. The talks, which have already seen 2 rounds mediated by Oman, focus on reaching an agreement regarding Iran's nuclear program. Araghchi expressed optimism, saying that a deal with the US to prevent conflict is within reach. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian also reacted to the impending talks. The leader expressed optimism aiming to resolve the ongoing standoff. He stated that there was a favorable outlook for the negotiations, which are ongoing under the guidance of Iran's supreme leader. Pezeshkian also emphasized that the goal is to move beyond the current neither war nor peace situation and find a resolution. In a separate development, the Iranian president also reassured university students protesting across the country, stating that the government is ready to engage and address their concerns. Joining us to discuss the ongoing tensions between Tehran and Washington is Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Raymond, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here on the broadcast. Of course, these tensions are escalating with neither here nor there. It's all shrouded in mystery right now whether the United States will indeed strike Washington. However, what we have seen is the Iranian foreign minister head over to Geneva to that third round of talks, which is of course a miraculous development due to the sheer difference of the pages the two sides were on before these talks even started. Donald Trump, once again, Raymond, I'm sure you saw, reiterating those same threats towards the Iranians, that the deal is needed to be reached, that diplomacy is preferred, but Donald Trump stands ready to launch military action if needed. What are the two sides going into this conflict, and how do you think that the Geneva talks will suffice under that military pressure which Donald Trump has put Iran under?
Well, thanks very much for allowing me to comment on this, Thomas. You know, in order to wage peace like you wage war, you've got to have strategy, you've got to have partners, and you have to have principles. Unfortunately, President Trump's approach to Iran has none of those. What he is trying to do is to portray this as some sort of real estate deal in which two leaders get together and they make a deal, and presumably President Donald Trump comes out on top. You heard, and we all heard, what President Trump said last night, saying that it was basically his way or the highway, that the United States would settle for nothing less than a complete cessation of any kind of nuclear enrichment that might lead to weapons, and complete withdrawal from Western Asia and the Middle East. This extremist position is a part of the art of the deal for President Trump. Rather than trying to build a relationship, what he's trying to do is, as I say, come out on top. From the Iranian perspective, the leadership has grave difficulties domestically. They do not want a war at this point. because a war would encourage domestic unrest and maybe lead to regime change. And so they're trying to talk both ways in terms of reaching a settlement, saying that there is optimism, while at the same time trying to placate the domestic problems and talking to students and others. Eventually, the regime in Tehran will fall, but it isn't going to be any time soon. And the most that can be hoped for, as Winston Churchill said, that jaw is better than war. From a U.S. perspective, Trump was elected in part on his promise to bring peace throughout the world, to withdraw from conflicts, whether they be in Afghanistan or elsewhere, and he's done exactly the opposite. So both sides are circling each other, but it is unlikely that there's going to be a move away from the present state of neither war nor peace. And the most we can hope for is that this will be delayed long enough so that saner actors on both sides will be able to provide some longer-term basis in terms of a principled approach to the problem.
Yes, Raymond, thank you very much. Do stay with us as we turn over to transatlantic relations for our next story. The US and Britain have tentatively restarted work on their multi-billion-pound tech prosperity deal, which was paused last year after President Donald Trump had piled pressure on the UK to cede ground in wider trade talks. According to reports, senior US and UK officials have initiated discussions about collaboration on civil nuclear technologies and on hosting a joint summit on fusion technologies. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that at the time that the two nations were embarking upon a golden age of nuclear energy, with more transatlantic cooperation and speedier regulatory approvals for atomic projects. Starmer has added that the deal was touted by the UK as including $341 million worth of investment from America's top technology companies. Raymond Vickery joins us here once again on this discussion. What are your thoughts on the United States and Britain once again restarting this work on this tech prosperity deal, which did pause last year, facing new trade uncertainties, of course, as well, after the tariffs have been struck down by the Supreme Court? How might this develop, and what's the trust going into negotiations now?
Well, thanks for letting me comment on this, Thomas. It seems to me that the prospect of restarting the UK-US tech prosperity deal is one that shows that the limits of the Trump approach in terms of transactions has wider implications for what is a special relationship, or has been a special relationship, between the UK and the US. This was really an initiative of Prime Minister Starmer to try to regroup in terms of the relationship, concentrating not on a particular deal, but a long-term relationship between these two great democracies. Unfortunately, President Trump sees everything as the leverage for a deal. And the whole tech prosperity deal was paused over the issue of the regulation of big tech, the United States companies who really don't want regulation, whereas the United Kingdom says, yes, there has to be regulation of these the technological giants. And so President Trump was trying to use this as leverage, not looking really at the relationship or what the purposes were of this deal, but seeing if he could accomplish something else on behalf of his constituents in U.S. big tech. It is remarkable, really, that it's being restarted again after being put in the deep freeze only a few months ago. Nevertheless, it's a hopeful sign that the underlying realities between the U.S. And U.K. economically and strategically require that there be not just a transactional approach, but a look at the long-term relationship.
Yes, Raymond, we'll keep tabs on that. Thank you so much for taking the time in joining us and giving us your insight there. It was great to have you. We turn now over to Eastern Europe for our next story. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán accused Ukraine of planning to disrupt the Hungarian energy system and ordered the deployment of soldiers and equipment to safeguard critical infrastructure. His action further escalates a dispute with Ukraine over an outage on the Druzhba oil pipeline carrying Russian crude deliveries to Hungary and Slovakia, both of whom blame Kiev for the prolonged halt to supplies for its refineries. Kiev says the outage was caused by a Russian drone striking pipeline equipment in western Ukraine. Orbán, speaking in a video on his Facebook page, reiterated the Druzhba shutdown was for political, not technical reasons, and said intelligence reports show possible further disruption to Hungary's energy system. Let's listen into what Orbán has said on the issue.
Tanácsülése, amit az ukrán olajblokkád miatt hívtam össze, január 27-e óta nem érkezik olaj a barátság kőolajvezetéken Magyarországra. Az adatokból egyértelmű, hogy ennek példanélküli leállásnak nem műszaki, hanem politikai okai vannak. Az ukrán kormány olajblokkáddal gyakorol nyomást Magyarországra és Szlovákiára. Meghallgattam a nemzetbiztonsági szolgálatok beszámolóit, látom, hogy Ukrajna további akciókra készül a magyar energiarendszer működésének megzavarása érdekében. Ezért elrendeltem a kritikus energetikai infrastruktúra védelmének megerősítését. Ez azt jelenti, hogy a kiemelt energetikai létesítmények közelébe katonákat és a támadások elhárításához szükséges eszközöket is telepítünk. A rendőrség a kijelölt erőművek, elosztóállomások és irányító központok környékén nagyobb erőkkel járőrözik majd. Szabolcs-Szatmár-Bereg vármegyében pedig elrendeltem a drón repülési tilalmat.
Joining us now to discuss this is Alison Mutler, the former Associated Press Bureau Chief, joining us live from Spain at this time. Thank you very much, Alison, for joining us here on the broadcast. Hungary here with some brazen accusations for Kiev. Orbán, of course, has led the charge in the European Union against anti-Ukraine rhetoric, let's put it. Does Orbán have any weight in his claims when it comes to his accusations that Kiev has purposely disrupted the Druzhba pipeline, of course obstructing energy from Russia into Ukraine, Slovakia and Hungary itself?
Russia's war against Ukraine, its invasion of Ukraine, is also a war with Europe and Orbán and Fico, but Orbán is a bigger name. Fico is the Prime Minister of Slovakia. It does play a key role. He is an ally, even though Hungary is a member of NATO and the European Union. He is an ally of Putin, more or less, not 100%, but more or less. So he's a voice for Putin. So obviously it is to be expected for him to say we're not getting the oil that we should get because, you know, Donald Trump has given us a reprieve on sanctions. We're not getting it for political reasons because of Ukraine. Now, Ukraine says it was bombed by Russia, the pipeline. It's a very chaotic war. It's very likely it was bombed by Russia, perhaps by mistake, by a drone. But Budapest comes out straight away and says, no, this is political and this is against us and this is Ukraine. So he serves two purposes. We're not getting the oil and it's Ukraine's fault and it's a political strike. Now, there is no weight to those words. He is doing what the Kremlin would want him to do. Of course, Orban is very grateful to get Russian oil, or to hope to get Russian oil. And so therefore he is serving the political purposes of the Kremlin. It's impossible to know actually what happened, but there is no evidence he presented. He says Hungarian intelligence. I'm not sure that Hungarian intelligence reaches that far, but obviously he hopes that gives weight to his claims. But basically it doesn't. This is a political statement for Orban to show once again that his alliances are more with the Kremlin than Ukraine. And we know he's anti-Ukraine, anti-helping Ukraine, anti-military aid to Ukraine. And he is dependent, his country, his government, because he faces election in next month, in April. He is dependent on the Kremlin for energy, and he will dance to their tune. He will sing the song they want him to sing. So I don't think his words have great weight because we have no evidence of what he says.
Yes, Alison, thank you very much. Do stay with us as we turn over to our next story. We move over the English Channel, where UK Parliament Speaker Lindsay Hoyle has revealed that he passed information to police about former British envoy to Washington, Peter Mandelson. The information is part of a misconduct in public office investigation related to Mandelson's links with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Mandelson is alleged to have passed financial information to Epstein when he served as UK Business Secretary from 2009 to 2010. Hoyle said he handed over the information in good faith and expressed his regret that it quickly became public. Mandelson was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office and has since been released on bail as the investigation into his ties with Jeffrey Epstein continues. Let's take a listen into the statements.
Members will be aware of comments in the media regarding the arrest of Lord Mandelson. To prevent any inaccurate speculation, I'd like to confirm that upon receipt of information that I felt it was relevant, I passed this on to the Metropolitan Police in good faith, as is my duty and responsibility. It is regrettable this rapidly ended in the media, as this is a live investigation. Members will understand that it would not be appropriate to make any further comment, and I'd like to caution members from doing so.
We move back over to West Asia. Syria has confirmed a mass escape of relatives of suspected Islamic State jihadists from the Al-Hol camp after the withdrawal of Kurdish forces last month. The camp, the largest in northeastern Syria, had been under the control of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, otherwise known as the SDF, who left under pressure on January the 20th. Syrian forces moved in quickly after the Kurdish withdrawal, but a chaotic situation ensued with more than 138 breaches in the camp's perimeter wall, allowing thousands of women and children to flee. Authorities have now moved remaining families to another location in northern Syria. The US military had previously moved over 5,700 IS suspects from Syrian prisons to Iraq as part of the global effort against the group. Let's take a listen in.
وعند وصول فرقنا المختصة تبين حدوث حالات هروب جماعي نتيجة فتح المخيم بصورة عشوائية مع ترك بعض عناصر الحراسة مواقعهم مع أسلحتهم، إضافة إلى إزالة حواجز داخلية ضمن المخيم، ما أدى إلى حالة من الفوضى كادت تهدد الأمن العام في المنطقة لولا التدخل السريع لمؤسسات الدولة السورية لإعادة.
Alison Mutler joins us once again. Alison, how serious is this situation, bringing further volatility to an already extremely volatile country? How might this develop and what damages might it cause?
Well, I think it's pretty serious. First of all, we find out more than a month later that there's been these 138 breaches, I think, on the camp, which is about, 17 kilometers the circumference. Okay, it's not necessarily dangerous prison, it's women and children, but it just shows the absolute chaos that is there. And what has happened with the Syrian forces pushing out the Kurdish ones that were guarding the prison. So I think this adds more tension. You already have, as you said in your report, the US has sent 5,700, I think, prisoners to be in Iraq. This is an idea. This is to dilute the power and to prevent them regrouping. But it's obviously quite a chaotic situation in northern Syria. Some of these women and children have been, reinterred. But it is very difficult, and there's more chaos. I mean, the whole region there's a lot of tensions there and chaos with all the different developments going on, different movements with the different forces, and with this is basically in the aftermath of the demise of the former regime. The current government is just a year and something old, so there are a lot of changes going on, and there's a lot of chaos as well. So yes, it just does add to that, and plus, as I said, the late reporting of this, it's more than a month old, this story.
Yeah.
So who knows what's happened in the meantime, and we're obviously not getting fresh reports out of there every day. So yes, it does add to the tensions and the chaos in the region.
Alison Mutler, thank you so much for taking the time as always. It's a great pleasure to have you on the broadcast here on NewsX World. We now turn over to our next story, and we finish in Europe, where Pope Leo XIV will visit 4 African nations in April, including a historic trip to Algeria, marking the first papal visit to the North African Muslim country. Reports suggest that the Pope will focus on interfaith dialogue during his visit to Algiers and Annaba from April the 13th to the 15th. The visit coincides with the 30th anniversary of the beheading of 7 French monks in Algeria's civil war. According to reports, he will also visit Cameroon, Angola and Equatorial Guinea, promoting peace amid separatist struggles, and before his African tour he will visit Monaco on the 28th and Spain in June, including the inauguration of a new Sagrada Familia Tower. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reforms, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to say.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Reports on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Iran and the US hold the latest round of talks in Geneva aimed at resolving their long-standing nuclear dispute and averting new US strikes on Iran following a large-scale military build-up. The two countries renewed negotiations, hoping to tackle a decades-long standoff over Tehran's nuclear program. Cuban forces killed 4 people and wounded 6 others aboard a Florida-registered speedboat that entered Cuban waters and opened fire on a Cuban patrol, the government said at a time of heightened tensions with the United States. The United States has eased an oil embargo on Cuba, but Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the communist-run island must change dramatically, saying it had only itself to blame for the economic crisis. Former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is set to testify behind closed doors before a congressional committee investigating the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Former President Bill Clinton is scheduled to answer questions the following day. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has said that he and the US President Donald Trump agreed that the next session of trilateral talks in March on a war settlement should lead to a meeting of the country's leaders. Jimmy Lai, the jailed pro-democracy tycoon, won an appeal overturning his 2022 fraud conviction. The Court of Appeal quashed the conviction, but Lai remains in jail. The death toll from the heavy rains in Brazil's southern eastern state has risen to 46. Flooding and landslides displaced around 3,600 people in the cities of Juiz de Fora and Uba, while 21 people remain missing. The US is blocking the Venezuelan government from paying for Nicolas Maduro's legal representative in the drug trafficking case he faces in New York. Maduro and his wife both pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking charges. And for your top stories this hour, ahead of talks in Geneva between the US and Iranian delegations, Vice President J.D. Vance said the United States sees evidence that Iran is trying to rebuild its nuclear program after US-led strikes against Iranian nuclear sites in June. Vance said that the principle is very simple and Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Listen in.
Well, I'm not going to make any news on Iran today, Caitlin. I'll let the president make those announcements. As you know, he is sending 2 of his best negotiators to Geneva tomorrow in order to continue to try to strike the best deal possible for the American people. But the principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically, but of course the president has other options.
Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi expressed optimism for an equitable deal, but insisted Iran will not forgo its right to peaceful nuclear technology. As tensions rise, the US has increased its military presence in the Middle East, with Iran threatening retaliation if attacked. President Trump has given Iran 10 to 15 days to reach an agreement. Listen in.
This afternoon, in order to have the 3rd round of our talks with the US team. And we have made some progress last time. We were able to find some sort of understandings. And I think based on those understandings, we can build something in the form of an agreement, a deal. I think a fair, balanced, and equitable deal is achievable.
We are now being joined by Peter Baum, who is an editor of Weekly Blitz, and he is joining us from London. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us here today on NewsX World. How should we interpret the US assertion that it sees evidence of Iran attempting to rebuild a nuclear weapon, and how credible is that claim?
Yes, all the research that's been done in the last few months seems to give credibility to that claim that indeed Iran is trying to continue on its nuclear program. How successful that's been, we don't know. And I think it would be very difficult for Iran to get back to where they were pre the 12-day bombardment that they suffered. Nevertheless, as you quite rightly said, that there's going to be further talks. But the thing that's been consistent, which is quite unusual for Donald Trump and his administration in all this, is the actual deliberate consistency in which he has continuously stated the 4 red lines that the US administration want to impose on Iran. And those 4 red lines and demands have been clear. The first one is stop uranium enrichment. The second is non-production of ballistic missiles. The third is stop arming and funding their proxies. And the fourth is to stop the clampdown, the violent clampdown on the domestic protesters. Unusually for Trump, he has been totally consistent with those demands, and his administration, whether it's through Vance or Rubio, continuously support that. Now, I don't see that the Iranians have any room for to be flexible on this, and given the consistency of Trump's demands, I don't think Trump will back down on this. So it's truly up to the Iranians to show a great degree of flexibility should they wish to avoid military conflict, which, as we all know, the Trump administration have been building up their military hardware in the area for weeks now. I don't think Trump can climb down from not using his military unless the Iranians give in to his demands.
And is it realistic to believe a nuclear deal remains achievable when both sides express such deeply contrasting positions?
No, I don't think it is, because one thing is for sure, that the Trump administration do not trust the Iranians. And of course, vice versa is true as well. So, and the Iranians have very little room for maneuver simply because they are the weakest they've ever been, politically, militarily, domestically, for nearly 50 years now. So I think the onus is really on the Iranians, should they wish to avoid conflict, to be as flexible as they can and give in to some of Trump's demands, which will be very unpalatable for them, but nevertheless, if they wish to avoid military conflict, they will have to do that.
And does the shadow of potential military escalation strengthen or weaken prospects for a diplomatic agreement on Iran's nuclear program?
Well, again, as I've suggested, I think it will strengthen the prospects for a diplomatic solution only if the Iranians bow to Trump's demands. He's got a gun to their head and they have very little room for maneuver. So depending on how strong the Iranians want to retain power will determine how flexible they are during this current round of negotiations. I'm very, very pessimistic about this because I think the Iranians will try and resist as much as they possibly can Trump's demands, and Trump has given them, I think you suggested 10 to 15 days. I think that time frame is probably more like 8 to 10 days now from the time he first mentioned it.
Thank you, Peter, but don't go too far as we'll be back with you very shortly. Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul has said Iran must engage in talks with the United States to stop supporting armed proxies like Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. Speaking alongside his Belgian counterpart Maxime Prevot, emphasised Germany's special responsibility for Israel's security. Meanwhile, Iran's President Massoud expressed hope for a positive outcome from the upcoming nuclear talks with the US as a delegation heads to Geneva for the third round of discussions. Listen in.
Wenn Teheran die Lage nüchtern analysiert, dann sollte es erkennen, dass es in diesen 3 Bereichen auf die USA zugehen sollte. Das ist auch die Erwartung Europas, denn auch wir werden dadurch bedroht. Es muss die Unterstützung von Hamas, Hisbollah und Houthis aufgeben. Und das sage ich insbesondere als deutscher Außenminister, der eine besondere Verantwortung für die Sicherheit des Staates Israel hat. Das sind Punkte, die wir seit längerem der iranischen Regierung vortragen und wo wir bisher zu wenig Kompromissbereitschaft erkannt haben. Ich hoffe, dass Teheran jetzt erkennt, dass es an der Zeit ist, hier Zugeständnisse zu machen und endlich eine konstruktivere Rolle in der Weltgemeinschaft einzunehmen.
We are now being joined back by Peter Baum. Thank you for joining us back here today. Can pressuring Iran to cut ties with groups like Hamas realistically advance peace efforts in the Middle East?
Yes, it can. And what we're seeing here, Ellie, is a united front from the members of the European Union supporting one of Trump's 4 demands that Iran stop arming and supporting their proxies, in this case Hezbollah. Now, very recently, the Israelis have been taking out weapons depots in Lebanon where Hezbollah are still relatively strong, and they had remarkable success just a couple of days ago, what they would consider to be a remarkable success, when they eliminated, I think, 10 of Hezbollah's top commanders in Lebanon in what was obviously a targeted strike from which they received intelligence from their sources in Lebanon. Now, with the Germans making such strong demands from Iran, this again will pressure the Iranians further to cede to one of Trump's red lines, which is stop arming their proxies. Further pressure being brought on them by members of the European Union, Germany being a very important country within that union, obviously. So, and Lebanon themselves are actually trying to disarm Hezbollah, although at the moment the Lebanese army doesn't have the competencies or the manpower, perhaps not even the political will, to do the job that Trump and Israel would like them to do. But nevertheless, they have been somewhat successful this year than they and the end of last year than they had been since the 1980s when Hezbollah were formed. So Hezbollah themselves, being one of Iran's main proxies, are themselves now facing increased pressure, not only domestically, but outside of Lebanon, internationally. And this will hopefully bring Iran to their senses to understand that they can no longer rely on what was formerly very strong military support from one of their proxies to help them in any conflict against Israel, who will certainly be brought into the war if Trump decides to attack.
Thank you so much, Peter Baum, for joining us here today on NewsX. Well, thank you. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio reaffirmed that the war in Ukraine does not have a military solution. He emphasised that only negotiations could end the conflict, positioning Washington as the essential mediator. Rubio's comments came after the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, following a phone call with US President Donald Trump, said Kyiv expects trilateral talks in March to pave the way for a leaders' meeting. Rubio also highlighted the US's ongoing efforts to pressure Moscow, including additional sanctions on Russia's oil company and continued arms sales to Ukraine. Regardless of the diplomatic push, Rubio made it clear that President Trump's patience is not infinite and expressed frustration with the prolonged war, calling it completely stupid and senseless. However, he reiterated the US commitment to working towards a peaceful resolution and asserted that only through negotiations could a long-term solution be reached. Meanwhile, both sides continue to prepare for the next round of talks with hopes to finalise a leaders' meeting in the near future. Let's listen in to what the US Secretary of State had to say.
This afternoon, in order to have the third round of our talks with the US team. And we have made some progress last time. We were able to find some sort of understandings. And I think based on those understandings, we can build something in the form of an agreement, a deal.
We are now being joined by retired Major General Sadakaji, who is a senior geopolitical and strategic defence expert. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. Does advocating negotiations risk undercutting military support for Ukraine, or is it a realistic recognition of the conflict's limits?
Good afternoon, Ellie. Thank you for inviting me for your show. Two components. One is the land estate under occupation by Russia, and second is the military aid to Ukraine. Be stopped or should be continued. My take on the whole issue is that if the peace process has to come to some kind of a tangible and substantive end state close to a ceasefire, a lasting ceasefire and lasting peace, then scaling down the expectations or demands from relevant stakeholders by the process of give and take should be an acceptable norm and practice. So if the military aid is being expected to be cut down to Ukraine, Russia also should be expected to cut down its activities of dominance along the eastern flank, that is the Donbas region. So therefore, to answer your question, I would recommend that a process of give and take, a negotiated stance should be expected. But while it is desirable, but is it feasible on ground? That's what the whole issue is. For that, one has to go back in time and analyze the historical triggers. That was the primary reason as to why Russia invaded. Unless we address the core issues, the conflict will continue unabated and maybe eternally. Thus, to bring this mindless conflict to an end, a serious and sincere effort has to go in. What Marco Rubio is saying as a political decision, what it means is that the concessions have to be made by both the sides, for which Zelensky has gone a great deal in scaling down his demands and his expectations. Maybe it will not be inappropriate to expect similar kind of scaling down or compromises to be made by Russia. Back to you, Eddie.
And can peace talks gain traction if both sides still remain far apart on the issues like territory, security guarantees and post-war arrangements? Are they just going to keep going back and forwards?
Absolutely. Short, the cryptic answer to your question is no. No headway can be made. This traction that you are talking of, I would actually put it this way, that some beginning has been made. And when you make a very noble and high-end objective
in a conflict-torn zone, one would expect that the process of negotiation would go through very significant milestones of denial, resistance, reconciliation, adaptation, finally acceptance. I think a long journey has been covered in a short time, wherein the demands have been scaled down. However, Russia should be very mindful of the compromises being made by Ukraine. While Ukraine is expected to understand the compulsions of Russia, Russia should also be made to understand the imperatives on which the Ukraine is expected, because ceding 20% of land will question the very validity of rules-based order in 21st century, that is the sovereign integrity and the territorial integrity. Therefore, is Russia prepared to accept a new norm or new normal, which is expected from Ukraine to become a kind of a rule of law? Well, if that is yes, then I don't think we are on a path to make any tangible progress. So therefore, the traction must continue, and no matter how much time it takes, this endeavor on part of Donald Trump and his team, I'm sure they are on a very progressive and forward-looking path for a lasting peace. Back to you, Ellie.
Thank you, Major General Sackerji, but don't go anywhere as we will join back with you in just a moment. Let's listen in to what the US Secretary of State had to say.
As an example, the president levied additional sanctions late last year on the oil company, Rosneft. The administration continues to sell weaponry to Ukraine. We don't sell weapons to Russia, and we don't sanction Ukraine. The president values the fact that he is the only global leader that has any chance in the world of bringing these two sides together to a negotiating table. We're the only country or only entity on the planet that's been able to achieve having Russian negotiators and Ukrainian negotiators sit at the table and talk to one another. So we don't want to walk away from the, we know that at the end, the war in Ukraine does not have a military solution. That war will be settled through a negotiation. And right now, we are the only country in the world that can be a catalyst for negotiation. If we forfeit that role, no one else can do it. That said, do I believe the president's patience is infinite? I do not. But I'm not going to forecast for you when that runs out or at what point he decides not to do it any longer. I could tell you, and I think you've heard him express, a deep frustration that this has not come to an end because he sees it as a completely stupid and senseless war.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stated that both Russia and China should be included in any future nuclear arms control agreement. Let's listen in to what he has to say in his statement.
So we believe, the president strongly believes, that for any sort of agreement on nuclear agreement in the 21st century to be legitimate, it has to involve these three countries, the United States, Russia, and China. And we're going to continue to explore their willingness to do so. They have publicly said they're not willing to do it. I'm sure you've heard them say that. I'm sure they've reiterated, and I know they restated that again very recently. But we'll continue to press on it because we think it would be good for the world if we could reach such an agreement. The president would be in favor of that if we could do it, but it has to be all.
In addition, Rubio has also touched upon China's rapidly increasing nuclear stockpiles, stating that while China may claim to be far behind the US and Russia in terms of arsenal size, they have the capacity to close the gap easily. Moreover, Rubio has discussed the current state of US-China relations, saying that both countries have reached a point of strategic stability, avoiding a full-blown global trade war. We're now being rejoined by retired Major General Sudhakar. Thank you for joining us back here. How does the expiry of the New START treaty between the US and Russia shape the urgency and complexity of creating a 21st century arms control deal that also accounts for China's growing nuclear state?
Yeah, great question. In 21st century, one would ideally expect the planet Earth to be free of any nuclear warhead. But that is not the case. The reality is China is going by leaps and bounds and expanding its nuclear arsenal and going in for very, I would say, potentially very dangerous weapon systems, particularly when it has developed the hypersonic glide vehicles, which can take the warhead. No radar system or surveillance system in the world available today, they may be able to detect, but they cannot intercept. So there is a huge danger. And second thing is that in its nuclear test site in Lochner, it is given to be believed that they have the weapon systems in mated condition. So under the circumstances, when the New START doctrine or agreement has expired on 5th of February or 6th of February this year, it is very, very extremely volatile and dangerous to have a world without any safety mechanism or monitoring mechanism and mechanism of checks and balances to prevent any nuclear holocaust. Therefore, the urgency, this is answer to the first part of your question. Second part about China being included in the agreement. Well, I would say that yes, the stance is very positive and legitimate. The expectations are also legitimate by USA, but is China going to come under pressure and toe the line? I don't think so, because China has got, rather I would say, far too many leverages in its favor. It can weaponize the rare earth elements. It can weaponize many other issues and technology, particularly critical minerals and technology, and it will start putting countervailing pressure against the USA. So therefore, I would recommend that it makes more sense to go in for a short-term, a medium-term, and long-term kind of a goal. In the short term, it is advisable to go in for extension of the START agreement, which expired on 6th of February this year, maybe for 1 year or 2 years or some kind of a stipulated timeline. And with a caveat that all-out effort should go in to bring in not only China, but all the nuclear weapon states. There are 9 of them as of now, as on today. Apart from Russia, China, and America, there are 6 more countries who also should be brought to the ambit. But even if it is not possible, at least the stated doctrine and a policy should outline an objective to bring everyone under the umbrella of a planet without the dangers of nuclear weapon and the kind of disaster we have had way back when the little boy and the fat man were dropped in 1945. Back to you, Ellie.
Thank you so much, Major General Stakiji, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that there is no set deadline for holding elections in Venezuela and emphasising the US has not established any artificial timeline for when voting should take place. Rubio has added that the interim Venezuelan president, Delcy Rodriguez, assumed power last month following the US removal of Nicolas Maduro from office. He also said that the country's ruling party-controlled legislature has since passed a limited amnesty law, which human rights groups say does not adequately free hundreds of political prisoners. Rubio has also stated that the country's ruling party-controlled legislature has since passed a limited amnesty law, which human rights groups say does not adequately free hundreds of political prisoners. Let's listen in to what Marco Rubio had to say.
Well, I don't know if we'd set an artificial timeline. The important part is just if you think about it logically, it's hard to have elections when many of the people that may want to participate in have been in jail or are still overseas. So I do think that as we enter this recovery phase, which we think I think we've done a pretty good job working with the interim authorities on the stabilization phase. You have not seen mass migration, you have not seen civil war, you have not seen violence. On the contrary, you've seen some real stability on the ground, and you've seen a growing in productivity among their key sectors. I think now you enter into this, we're increasingly entering into this phase of recovery. And part of that is a national reconciliation. So there have been very positive steps taken. Hundreds of political prisoners have been freed. The infamous prison El Agoida has been closed.
The FBI has subpoenaed phone records of Kash Patel and Susie Wiles, now the FBI Director and White House Chief of Staff, respectively. The actions took place during former President Joe Biden's administration in 2022 and 2023, while Special Counsel Jack Smith's probe was underway. Reports say that Jack Smith was investigating current President Donald Trump's handling of classified documents and possible interference with the 2020 election. Kash Patel claims that the subpoenas were an example of overreaching by government officials and a flimsy attempt to evade oversight. Moreover, Patel has contended that the records were filed in a way that made them difficult to locate once the FBI took over in 2025, and he criticised the FBI for not disclosing the seizure. Meanwhile, the FBI has not commented on the purpose of obtaining these records. Separately, a federal judge has ordered the Justice Department to keep Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on the classified documents in the investigation under seal, blocking its release to the public. The University of California has sold approximately $2 billion in general revenue bonds while facing ongoing pressure from the US. The funds from this bond sale will be used to finance or refinance various university projects. However, the sale comes amid a lawsuit from Trump administration, accusing the university system of discrimination against Jewish and Israeli employees at UCLA. This lawsuit follows previous attempts by Trump to freeze federal funding for the University of California, Los Angeles, due to pro-Palestinian protests, although these attempts were blocked by a judge. Despite these challenges, the University of California's system continues to monitor federal actions regarding higher education. Last year, other universities like Harvard also issued bonds to protect against funding uncertainty. Furthermore, the University of California receives over $17 billion annually in federal support, which highlights the financial importance of resolving these ongoing disputes. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Iran and the US hold the latest rounds of talks in Geneva today aimed at